Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Suburban Proletarian. Back in the 1960s, the Chinese watch industry had reached a level of maturity and sophistication that really kind of upset the Chinese communist government, which liked centralized control of everything. And there were somebody in the Chinese government, some bureaucrat, decided that there were just too many different watches out there and too many different designs and too many different individualized parts. And they decided that the Chinese industry, the Chinese watch industry, collectively would have to come up with a design for a watch that would be more or less standard. Very, very, very proletarian and very egalitarian. Everybody's equal because everybody has basically the same watch. And of course, that never turns out to be the case. But the Chinese government did put a big emphasis on this project, and they got a bunch of engineers from all of the major Chinese watch manufacturers together, put them in one room or one research laboratory or whatever for a couple of years, and they developed what came to be known as the Chinese Standard Watch, or the Chinese Tongji. Every major manufacturer was required to produce essentially the same watch. So you had companies like Beijing and I think Seagull, and in this instance, Shanghai. This particular watch is a Shanghai. I've had it for about 2 years, and I've been meaning to do a video about it for a while, and it's a pretty interesting watch. So let's turn the camera around onto the tabletop and take a closer look at this Chinese Standard Watch. Okay, everyone, so here is our little Chinese Standard wristwatch. I am by no means an expert on these things. I'm sure some of you know more about these watches than I do, and you're more than welcome to share some of your knowledge down below in the comments section if there's something I overlook. These were at one point in time made by every major watch manufacturer in China. Today there are reissues still being made by the Beijing Watch Company and as you can see here, the Shanghai Watch Company. This certainly features a Shanghai version of the SZ-1 standard watch movement. As far as the case and the dial and all of that, I don't know who did that. I don't know if this was made at the Shanghai factory. It was probably assembled at least in the vicinity of the Shanghai Watch Factory. It's my understanding that there are numerous watch shops surrounding the factory where you can go in and buy watches. And I think perhaps they just case original Shanghai movements, case them up in a case with a dial and everything to your specification is my understanding. But this is a fairly accurate reproduction of an original Shanghai Tongji standard wristwatch. There are a bunch of different variations available. I selected this particular one because it had a handset with a minute hand that actually reaches the markers on the chapter ring there, so you can actually get a fairly accurate idea of what the time is. A lot of these reproduction Tongji watches have hands that are very, very short, and that is a design element that kind of bothers me. So I went with this one mostly because of the very long handset that actually reaches the minute markers. If you look at the second hand, you'll see there's a little circle there with a bit of red. It's my understanding in the original watches there was actually a red glass bead inset into the second hand, but this is clearly not that. This is clearly just a little bit of red enamel in a circle, but it's still a nice touch. It adds a bit of authentic flavor to the watch. This has the 19 jewel SZ-1 standard movement in it. The originals were 17 jewels. The movement itself is clearly based on, or at least heavily influenced by the Enamel caliber AR-1010. As a matter of fact, the cases of these watches even feature an Enocar-style case back, which requires this sort of weird polygonal case back wrench to open. It's not really clear why the Enocar AR-1010 movement was chosen to be the basis for the SZ1 movement. There's no evidence that Enocar provided any assistance in developing the Chinese watches. It's likely the case that Enocar just happened to be one of the few Swiss watchmakers that was importing watches into China and at the time. And in typical Chinese fashion, the engineers simply set to work reverse engineering the Swiss movement. So that's not a bad thing. Well, I mean, stealing somebody's design is a bad thing, but the fact that they used the Enocar AR-1010 is not necessarily a bad thing. If I recall correctly, a variant of the 1010 movement was the first movement from Enocar to achieve COSC chronometer certification. So the base movement is a pretty good movement, and the Tongji SZ1 movement turned out to be pretty good as well. These watches have an excellent reputation, or the movement has an excellent reputation for durability and long life and relative accuracy. I'm not sure. I think I did time this watch at one point in time. I don't remember what the accuracy rating was off the top of my head, but I think these are capable of being fairly accurate anyway. Let's take a look at some of the specifications of this exact watch, starting with the dimensions. The case diameter is just about 36 millimeters. The lug width is a very non-standard 19 millimeters, which is going to make it a little bit more difficult to find aftermarket straps and bracelets. The strap that came on this watch was some horrible pleather piece of junk that immediately started delaminating. So I ordered this leather watchy band, also from China, but it's actually a nice quality leather strap, and I think it complements the watch nicely, and it's been holding up fairly well for about 2 years. If you look elsewhere on my channel, you'll find an unboxing video of this watch strap where I talk a little bit more about where you can find it. So yeah, 19 millimeter lug width isn't ideal, but what are you going to do? I seem to recall most of these watches have a 19 millimeter lug width. That was probably also specified by the Chinese government. It's about 43 millimeters over the lugs, and it stands about, wow, only 11 millimeters off the wrist. So it's a fairly low profile watch, and obviously the dimensions overall, wow, took a little while for it to focus there. The dimensions overall are fairly small. The watch obviously is not going to wear very large, but this is a dress watch, so you know, I'm not really into huge dress watches. I think 36 millimeters is just about an ideal size for a watch like this. The watch does feature a stainless steel case. I mean, it's a pretty nice case. It's nicely finished and polished all the way around. No ugly tool marks in evidence. For a watch in this price range, I think it's pretty darn nice. Now, this does feature, and I think almost every one of these Chinese standard watches that you find, or at least when I was shopping, feature an acrylic crystal, which is authentic to the watch. There may be some available with sapphire now. Sapphire is so inexpensive in China. They've really worked out the details on how to manufacture it in an economical fashion. So there may be some of these with sapphire crystals. I opted for the original acrylic. I just think it looks more authentic. It is slightly domed, but it has very square shoulders. So it's sort of an old-fashioned type acrylic crystal, but I think it gives a nice authentic look to the watch. These movements do have a reputation for durability. This is not a hard use watch, though, I can tell you right now. If you think that this watch is going to be waterproof at all when you get it, water resistant at all when you get it, I hate to break the news to you, but it is not. I don't know if you'll be able to see this or not, but there's visible movement in the stem of the on the bottom of the crown here. There's clearly not even an O-ring inside there. There's absolutely no tension on the stem at all. So water is going to flow right through this thing. I wouldn't even walk within range of a lawn sprinkler wearing this watch. I certainly wouldn't wear it in the rain. And if you want to destroy this watch, just wash the dishes with it. Now, the original standard that was set by the Chinese government for these Tongji watches, there was a water resistance requirement, but it was a requirement that the watch should be able to withstand being submerged in 1 meter of water for 1 minute. This watch would not pass that test, in my opinion. And I think I recall correctly that that's what the standard was. But so this is definitely a watch to wear for someone who's working in a climate-controlled office building somewhere and who's not going to wear this thing on the weekend when they go to the beach, because I would say that the gap around this stem is enough that the watch is not only not water resistant, it's not going to be particularly dust resistant either. The crown is kind of nice. It's actually signed. It has the, I'm assuming, the Beijing name there. There's another thing about this particular watch that's a bit idiosyncratic, and it doesn't really bother me, but it might be bothersome to some of you if you're thinking about buying this watch, so I thought I would point it out. And that is the fact that the legends at the bottom of the dial, the text, one of which declares that the watch is shockproof, and the other one gives a jewel count, should say, and I'm probably going to murder the pronunciation here, Fangzhen, and the jewel count would be 19 Zuan. And they transliterated some of the Latin letters incorrectly. Specifically, they used a capital letter R where they should have used a capital letter A, and they used a capital letter B where they should have used a capital letter G. So it says Fernbuzhen where it should say Fangzhen, and it says 19 Zern where it should say 19 Zuan. So that's a little bit weird, and I just thought I ought to let you know about that. So overall, it's a good-looking watch. It's, as far as I know, a fairly authentic reproduction of an original Chinese standard wristwatch. It's got a good movement in it. I've had this watch probably close to 2 years now, and I've worn it, obviously not outdoors, not around water, but I've worn it, you know, to go out to dinner or go to nicer sort of dress-up functions now for about 2 years. It works perfectly well. It keeps reasonable time. Again, I don't remember exactly what the measurement was that I took, but I seem to recall that it keeps reasonably good time. So anyway, these are just fun, interesting watches. They're fairly inexpensive. The only way to buy one is directly from China, and it is going to take several weeks for it to get to you. But there's several good dealers out there. I will talk about one of them in the wrap-up. And I think that's about all I have to say about the watch. So let's move back over to the bookshelves and do the wrap-up. So the Chinese standard wristwatch, as made by Shanghai or maybe Beijing, or I think there's some that you can, some reissues that you can get through Seagull. It's a pretty interesting watch. They're fairly inexpensive. I think I paid about $45 for this one a couple of years ago. The prices may have gone up slightly, but I don't think very much. I don't have any sponsors on this channel. I'm not in the business of promoting people's companies, but I can tell you, I purchased this through a website called good-stuffs.com. Stuff being pluralized. And the company name, I think, is Times International. They seem to be very keen on pluralizing words that don't need to be pluralized. But it's good-stuffs.com. I'm not going to post the web address in the description, or I'm not going to put it here on the screen because, again, I'm not in the business. I don't know if they're even still in business, and I'm not in the business of promoting people who aren't sponsoring me, and I don't have anybody sponsoring me, so I'm just not in that position. But that's where I got mine. The company has a pretty good reputation, or at least they did when I bought mine. They were known for being fairly reputable, and I had a very good experience with mine. So that might be one option for buying one of these Chinese standards. Anyway, it's a really cool watch. These aren't super authentic because, of course, they're being reissued. The movement inside is, I think, a new old stock Shanghai Tongji standard movement, but of course the case is a reproduction, and the dial and the crystal and everything like that are reproductions they might be made by Shanghai, but they're certainly, I think, assembled by a third party and sold and shipped also by a third party. But anyway, it's a pretty cool watch. Again, quite inexpensive. It's, I mean, for a hand-wound mechanical 19 jewel watch that's really built to a fairly high standard, where else are you going to get that for 45 bucks? That seems like a pretty good value, to me anyway. Hopefully some of you have found this video to be interesting. If you did and you'd like to see more like it, please consider subscribing to the channel. It goes a long way to help keep me here on the tube. If you're already a subscriber, click the little bell icon down below. That'll allow you to receive notifications when I post new content to the channel. Like, share, tell your friends. You guys know the drill. All those things go a long way to help me out. When I do post new content to the channel, next time I make a video, I hope to see each of you here then. Later, guys.